Okay, aloha and welcome back everybody to the Awakening to the Magic of the Menstrual Cycle Summit. What a mouthful that is. Today I have the beautiful Miss Amanda Montalvo here, and we are gonna be briefly touching on a little bit about diet and nutrition when it comes to the menstrual cycle. Amanda is a certified dietitian, and I am so happy to have you here with us today, Amanda. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat. This is like my favorite topic. So
Yay! I'm pretty sure that's what like every single speaker in the summit says. Myself included.
and that's why they're here.
Sorry, broke up. But that's okay. That happens. Okay. Anyways. So let's start with you sharing a little bit about your journey and what brought you to this work.
Okay, so I got started in women's health after I had all my own health issues, which is I feel like everyone kind of within this specific area. So I was transitioning off the pill when I was like 21-ish, and I just stopped taking it, and I didn't think anything of it because I was in dietetic school learning about nutrient deficiencies in the pill, and that kind of got me starting to think I haven't really thought too much about this thing that I'm putting in my body, let me do some more research. That research led me to being so I'm not ovulating, and I didn't know that, which probably sounds crazy to some of you, but I really didn't know, and I was I don't like that. So I decided to come off. I ended up not getting my cycle back. I got my acne I've always had acne, but it got way worse. I had all these issues, low energy, weight gain. I was basically in shock. I had no idea that any of this was going to happen or even could happen. And so that got me, talking to different doctors, seeing an endocrinologist, a naturopath, and I just had a really hard time getting people to really listen to me and fully get the big picture, because I looked healthy on the outside, but I was but I feel terrible, so that's kind of what got me into doing more of my own research. I'm definitely a nerd at heart. In dietetic school, that's basically you learn research science, you do studies and stuff like that. So that got me just doing a ton of research, and that's what really got me understanding, even my firsthand experience, that women's health is just an area that's greatly underserved, in my opinion. And so I wanted to help change that.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I completely agree. And I just want you to know that I took the pill for 9 years, and I didn't know that I wasn't ovulating until after I stopped taking it. And 9 months later, when I ovulated for the first time, basically, this is kind of a good amount of personal information here, but I trust that everybody that's tuning into this are really awesome women. So basically what happened to me was 9 months after I took the pill, when my body released an egg, I wonder if it even released a few of them, honestly. My body released an insane amount of cervical fluid. It was like I wet my pants. There was so much that came out of me. I was like, whoa. And it was then that obviously clued me into the fact that, oh my gosh, I'm fertile again. And holy shit, I haven't actually been releasing eggs this entire time. What's been going on with all of these eggs that have been supposed to be coming out of me for 9 years? So it's not just you that didn't know. I think that you just hit it right on the nail, that the whole realm of women's health there has just been not nearly enough attention or energy being put into it, and I'm just so grateful that that's changing right now, and that women have been allowing their kind of hardships to serve them, wake them up, and teach them and give them wisdom so that they can share with other women. So I'm really grateful that you have been answering the call to serve. So I want to hear a little bit about what you have learned when it comes to diet and nutrition and the menstrual cycle. Maybe like some key pieces that stuck out to you when you first started learning it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it kind of came like with my own experimentation and then, looking into how to support your body during the different phases and just kind of learning about those, which I think has so much value for women because a lot of times like we kind of feel crazy, it's easy to feel that way, especially because society doesn't really, support shifts throughout your cycle and having shifts in like energy and stuff like that. But some of the biggest things that I think are really helpful for women to understand is while I do talk about like certain foods for different phases, I think just overall, we have to really think about, are you nourishing yourself on a daily basis? And when we're not doing this, how does this impact our hormones, which impacts how we feel all the time, pretty much. So I just kind of really dug into, I have a huge dieting history. I'm sure like many women listening to this probably can relate. And just like underfeeding myself, like with the majority of the food that I was eating, lots of restriction. And when I started to lift those restrictions and just make sure that, okay, like, what am I really craving right now? And am I hungry? Listening to like your hunger and fullness cues, all those different things. Like when I really just started trusting my body a little bit and not being so afraid of it, my periods got better. And I was like, interesting, like how that works when we really start to tune in. And some of the things that I'll say like kind of specifically were like carbohydrates. I was very afraid of for a super long time. I think it's just kind of like the dieting world. We start to demonize certain foods. So I was really afraid of like carbs and sugar and stuff like that. Even though my whole background, I've known they're really important for you if you just pair them with other foods, like it's fine. I still had this like diet mentality in my head for a long time. And so when I just started to lift those things, eating enough food, listening to my hunger and fullness cues, that really helped a lot. And a lot of it, I think, is honestly reducing stress on the body. That's kind of what it comes down to and what I see with a lot of other women. And when you start to do that, you can feel better and then have better hormone balance, which can lead to a much happier period.
Definitely. And just like focusing on reducing the stress that you are exposing yourself to and helping to cultivate ways to process it in a healthy way, that helps hugely with your relationship with food, because so much of eating in modern day world isn't for hunger, it's for comfort. And you oftentimes what I say to clients and people that come to me is that you can't expect to heal your relationship with food and like take certain things away if you're not willing to add other things and adopt other habits, healthier habits that are going to support you and give you what you need, which is why you're like reaching for food in the first place.
Yeah.
That's a really good message to reiterate to women is the need to really trust your body for one, and work on your stress levels.
And I think too, if we even just think about like what's happening, just think of your menstrual phase, for example. So we're bleeding, we're shedding a layer, our body is doing work, but we're also losing something. And so it's like, how are you going to nourish your body and replenish that something that you're losing? And also keeping in mind that like it's okay if you're feeling a little extra tired during this time, that's normal. Obviously you don't want to be like crazy fatigued. That's not, if it's, impacting your day to day, that's not great, but kind of honoring your body during that time. And I always like to have like healthy, I hate even just saying like healthy, but like optimal foods that I know that I like and make me feel good. I like to have those prepared before I know my period's coming so that I can have things to reach for because I know I'm going to be more tired. So, and I think all of that's kind of to say that if you start shifting your intentions behind things, like why you're doing things, it really helps work on that relationship with food, because if I always just think it's like I was always either like eating because I was, okay, well, I worked out a bunch so I can eat, or restricting because I felt like I didn't deserve that food. And so that's a very rough mindset. That's a lot of stress on the body, like mentally and physically. And so that's going to take a toll over time. And so when you start to remove those things and be like, okay, well, I want to feel good, and I am a human, and my body needs energy. My cells need energy and nutrients. That's why I'm eating. It removes a lot of that stress. And I think that can be really helpful.
Definitely. Yes, I completely agree. Man, I just forgot what I wanted to say on that. Uh, but I'll just jump to the next couple of questions floating around in my head.
I'm sure it'll come back.
Yes. Okay. So you have done, you have a good amount of experience in getting familiar with like the hormones. So I'm wondering if you could share like a few signs or symptoms of a hormonal imbalance for the audience, like maybe what some of those might look like for some people.
Yeah, so, and I will say I'm going to be referring to like sex hormones. We have a lot of different hormones in the body, so I think it, like, hormone imbalance is so like it's just like a tricky term. So I'll say like probably the most common one that I see with women is that time, the end of their luteal phase, like right before their period. And this is where the majority of the women I work with struggle the most. And some of the biggest signs are lots of fatigue leading up to this sign, which again, like some fatigue is going to be normal. Your energy is going to shift, but basically like 2 weeks before their period, they're super fatigued. Excessive cravings, which you are going to have some cravings because as you are creating more hormones and processing more, your metabolic rate actually increases during this time. So it's normal to have some cravings, but like basically ones where they cannot, if like they feel like they have zero control over it, they're super strong, stuff like that. Mood changes, lots of bloating, sometimes constipation, and like alternating constipation and loose stools. And then just like pain, right? That pain leading up to their period, maybe headaches or migraines right before or during. Those are probably the most common ones that I see. And it's during this time, like the biggest thing that women often struggle with is that estrogen and progesterone balance, because if we think about your whole like cycle, we're going to have that really big shift in estrogen right before we ovulate and release that egg. That's what kind of stimulates that. And then it goes down a little bit, but it's still decently high. And then progesterone increases after ovulation. So these hormones should be balanced, but if our estrogen is higher than our progesterone, even if it's like a little bit, or if we have normal estrogen and our progesterone is low, that's when we can see a lot of these symptoms pop up. And acne, I should definitely say. That's probably one of the biggest complaints I get. And so when we start to notice those things, that's when it's kind of like, okay, I want to make note of all these things. So as you start to make changes, you can kind of monitor those as you go forward.
Beautiful. I used to have acne pretty bad, and it took me years to heal that. And it's just so amazing how like just cleaning your diet up fixes so many different things. Like rather than like picking the body apart into sections and looking at each symptom individually and trying to figure it out and what the cause is, it's amazing how just cleaning your diet up can heal so many different things in your body without even having to like focus on the why something is happening necessarily, or figuring out how a certain symptom like functions. I think it was like years of like steadily working to clean my diet out that eventually really started reflecting in my skin. And also eventually I kind of started cluing in on a couple of like main culprits that like right now, for instance, if I allow them into my diet, my skin will tell me about it. For instance, my body doesn't really like dairy very much. I don't have a problem with it in my digestion, but I always get pimples from it. And I think the same thing, like if I was to eat too much sugar or like a bunch of cane sugar, because I usually avoid that. I am a big fan of coconut sugar. Um, those two things in particular, I noticed make a really big difference in my skin. So I know that just like taking those two out of the diet can make a really big difference for some women. Have you?
I I'm like a really big proponent of dairy, so I try not to take that out of people's diets if they can digest it well.
Sure.
It's a very healing food. It has like a really great balance of amino acids that we don't get from muscle meats,
Hmm.
and even some organ meats. And so it has in our like our fat soluble vitamins, it has so many nourishing things for minerals and our hormones and everything. And even your skin, when you think about it, it's really rich in like the fat soluble vitamins, which are important for skin health. But of course, if you can't break it down well, then it can definitely be inflammatory and show up in the skin. But I have seen a lot of women remove dairy and they're like, oh, I have like better skin. It's that's fine, but kind of how you were saying before with the whole acne, and instead of picking apart the little symptoms, like you kind of zoom out and look at the big picture. That's how I am with basically everything. And so if someone can't digest dairy or they get acne from it, I'm like, that's communication from your body. That's biofeedback, right, that you're getting. And so that's important to take into note. And then same thing with all those PMS symptoms. It's not that we would need to go and test your hormones, and you can do that stuff. It's not bad, and I do that with some people, but there's so many things like through your food that you can try, and then you always have to think about all the other things that can impact that, and like stress and stuff like that, sleep, so many different things. So I think it helps kind of like zooming out, looking at that big picture.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing that. Um, yeah, and that kind of got me to thinking like dairy, for instance, and the modern day like agriculture and corporate food industry. I think there's a big difference between like small farms and big factory farms where they really poorly treat the cows and they shoot them up with antibiotics and growth hormones and that stuff. And like that stuff I think makes a big difference. And I think oftentimes people kind of like think of the actual product itself as bad when it's actually like the quality and the way that it's being produced. It's not actually the product itself. Like wheat, for instance, I was like really like no gluten, no bread or anything like that. And then when I was in India, that's like a huge part of their diet. It's they're like constantly making like all types of flatbreads. And so that's just what I ate for like 4 months. And my body did great with it. And that experience really honed me in on the fact that it's not the wheat necessarily that I think that most people are sensitive to. It's like all the pesticides that are sprayed on it. And it's the specific types of wheat that have been like hybridized and crossbred to like produce more yield, which ultimately makes them like less nutrient dense. And so yeah, that type of thing is like it's really good to keep in mind that oftentimes it's not even the product, it's like where you're sourcing it from and the practices that those farms are participating in. And that's why I'm like always a big advocate of supporting small local farms. And just, I know not everybody has access to like the highest quality everything, and it's definitely not necessary to like add a bunch of guilt to your plate because you can't get the best of everything, but just to kind of like keep that piece of awareness in your mind of that, like your body is like the temple that houses your consciousness. So you want to nourish it with the best quality of everything that you can. And even if you don't have access to the best of everything, just do the best you can with what you have. Just make the best and most informed decision with where you're at, and then just be okay with that.
Yeah, and I will say, like, if anyone is kind of like, how do I find a farm in my area? Because I move like every couple of years because my husband's in the military. I do this often. So you can go to Weston A. Price Foundation. They have a whole chapter on their website that's like dedicated to like finding quality animal products in your area. So if anyone's kind of like, oh, maybe I want to try that type of like a raw dairy or something like that, or like if you get it from a local farm, even if it's not raw, it's likely much less processed than what you're going to get in the grocery store. So you can consider that.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for that. Can you tell me what that's called again? The
Weston A. Price Foundation.
West
Weston A. Price.
Weston A. Okay. Maybe if you can give me the link for that.
Yeah.
Write that for everybody. Cool. Thank you. That sounds like a really invaluable resource. I personally move a lot too, but I don't have the excuse of anybody being in the military.
I wish that wasn't why we were moving.
Well, you get a lot of experience and you get to you get to practice your adaptability.
Yes. We've definitely built a lot of resilience being in there.
I bet. Okay, so there was one piece that I wanted to kind of rewind and touch back with you on, because this piece is something that I have not really seen anybody talk about. And it's something that I have personally been observing in my own body during my cycles. And I've just found it fascinating. And I've been really kind of like wishing that there was more research that was done on it. Because I have noticed, you mentioned that your metabolism increases. I have noticed that, so in Ayurveda, your digestive fire is called Agni. So having a stronger Agni is basically equivalent to having a higher metabolism. It's just your body processing food faster. And I've noticed that whenever I bleed, my Agni is like at least twice as strong as it normally is. And my body just like burns through food, and I can eat at least 2 times more than I normally can. And I find it fascinating to observe the digestive system while you're bleeding, because from what I have experienced, the entire thing changes during menstruation and functions differently and functions more efficiently. And I'm sure that is kind of like, I mean, the womb's cleaning itself out, you know, so it's kind of like that cleaning out internal switch that gets flipped or activated, but it's not just your womb that does it. It's like a whole systems clean out. And I just think that is so freaking awesome.
Yeah, and I often will get questions around digestion, like pre-period and like during and everything, and how you mentioned how your metabolism increases and that metabolic rate. So when our metabolism increases, so is our digestion. Metabolism controls everything. Hormone production, how quickly you're getting nutrients into your cells, everything changes. And so if you think about your metabolism kind of increasing during that time, you can get that boost in digestion as well. So that could kind of be part of the reason why you experience that.
Definitely. I love having someone with like a Western perspective to talk to about this, because it kind of like, I'm like making all kinds of connections between the Western form of thinking and Ayurveda. One of my favorite parts about school was learning about Agni, again, the digestive fire, and how there is a smaller digestive fire for every transformational process in the body, every metabolic process, every type of process in your body that is taking one substance and turning it into another. There's, according to Ayurveda, there's like a smaller Agni that does that, and it all stems back to your main Agni, which is your belly's digestion, which is why the gut is like so hugely focused on when it comes to being healthy, because just like you just said, like your metabolism controls everything, and it's like main engine is your digestion in your belly. So that's really cool that you just shared the way that works for allopathic medicine. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I will say, like, not, I mean, like I'm like obviously a conventionally trained dietitian, but I did go back for functional medicine because it is very different. Like, you know, your doctor is never going to say that to you. They'll probably won't even really understand like metabolism. But yeah, it's so interesting to kind of see the parallels of like, because it's all science. It's just, you know, a different type of science.
Totally. It's just a different perspective.
Yeah.
But I feel like having like different angles help to make even more connections within you when you're understanding things. It's really cool. Okay, so for anybody that is wanting to begin nourishing their hormones and their cycles more nutritionally, do you have any like type of advice for like beginners on like how to just start on this path of supporting your cycle from a nutrition perspective?
Yeah, I will say, like, to keep it super simple, you want to think about, you know, we all talk about being like well fed, fully nourished. Like, what do those really mean? And it's really giving your body the nutrients that it needs to carry out the different processes, like creating hormones, detoxing hormones, processing them out, supporting digestion. All those different things impact our hormone levels in the body. And so it's kind of like, how do we make sure that those are completely squared away? And so what I always think of is kind of going back to the basics of how are we going to get all those nutrients in the body in the least stressful way possible, right? So if we think about how to minimize stress with food, it's we want to eat foods that have really high amounts in really digestible sources of proteins, carbohydrates, fats, and then vitamins and minerals. And so I love kind of like a mix of like protein, fat, and carb at all of your meals. You know, we talked about like kind of mindfully sourcing animal proteins. Animal proteins are very valuable. I know there's a lot of arguments around this whole topic. I will say if we just think about how the body works, they contain the highest amounts of complete proteins and amino acids that we need, and they're the easiest for us to absorb. And so that's really important. A lot of women I work with deal with digestive issues, and they're also trying to get a lot of their nutrients from plant sources, and it just doesn't work. Then they end up with lots of nutrient deficiencies and hormone imbalances. So just kind of like, that's a super basic way. It's like, okay, like I'm going to try to source some quality animal proteins, work those into my day, balance out other foods that I'm eating with them because it helps us digest and absorb things better. And you know, try not to stress so much around your food. I know that's like that's like a whole other conversation, but there's no perfect way of eating. And so if your body's really craving something, I'm like, eat it, move on, you know, and then take
And
all the,
eat it and enjoy it.
yeah, eat it, enjoy it, and just kind of let it go. And like, you know, we don't need to like constantly overthink food, but yeah, thinking about the sources that you're going to like digest and absorb the best, and just balancing out those meals. That's the most basic way, because that's going to help balance your blood sugar. It's going to give you the nutrients you need, supports your liver, digestion. It really kind of covers all those bases. So that's like a really good place to start.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Wow, I'm learning so much with you today. I just want to add a little bit on that, like, because I have spent years, you know, feeling bad about my body and guilty about food. And I think that the guilt and shame that we pile on top of it is worse for us than whatever we're actually eating. And I just want to say that, like, your body's listening to you. So if you're going to eat something, don't eat it with the mindset that this is bad because your body is listening and it's like, oh, okay, whatever she's giving me right now is bad. So if you're going to eat something, even if it's junk food or something that's not typically healthy for you, just like give thanks for it and like tell your body that it's good for that moment and enjoy it so that your body can like at least do its best to process it and assimilate it and get whatever it can out of it and get rid of whatever isn't going to serve you. Like just the mindset that you have when you're eating and towards your food makes a really big difference, like you said. So as best as you can, try not to stress about how you're eating. And I'm sure you understand wholeheartedly that healing your relationship, not only with your body, but with food also, is a journey. It's a journey. It's not an overnight thing. It's completely unique to each individual. And there's a specific formula for every person that's not going to be the same for everyone else. So really cultivating a deeper connection with your body and just practicing trusting it, like you said earlier, and listening for its feedback goes a long way.
And you know what's interesting? I feel like you would enjoy this. So there was a study done, a few studies done, and basically they took two groups of people from two different cultures, and they took their kind of staple foods that they traditionally eat, and they measured the nutrient absorption from the two different cultures and the foods that they eat all the time. Just so it's like foods they enjoy, that they grew up with, they have memories around. They're much more than food, basically. So they absorbed a bunch of nutrients from those foods, even though like very different foods. I think it was like one Asian and one like European country. And so that's what they did. And then they switched them. So they had the Asian culture eat the traditional European foods, and then the European culture eat the traditional Asian foods. And they were like very different things that they probably hadn't eaten before. And they didn't absorb as many nutrients from the other foods, because it's like they weren't enjoying the food. It didn't have all the same. There's just, yes, there's so many things like nutritionally, and I definitely love to nerd out and talk about nutrients that our hormones need and everything, but it just goes to show that there's still so much we don't know about nutrition science and how it works. And so it's like, just remember that, like, if you're enjoying your food, you're probably absorbing more from it, and it's just a good reminder.
Yes. Oh, that's so interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and I think that kind of just like ties back into the like reducing stress also, because when you're in that, I am like totally not good with scientific terms, but what is it, like the parasympathetic process, where I don't even know if I'm saying this correctly, but like it's, if you're in like a calm state, your body's going to absorb more than if you're stressed out. It just like makes all the systems of your body in like a kind of like a tense state, and not in a relaxed, receptive state to receive whatever it is that you're giving your body. So that's just a really beautiful example of that. I'm so glad people do experiments like that. That is so cool.
I know, it's really, and you were right. It is parasympathetic is relaxed, and then the stressed out state is the sympathetic.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Learning. Okay, so I'm wondering if like you have anything to say about specific foods that are better for specific times of the cycle, or something along.
Yeah, I will say, so like some foods that can be extra supportive at certain times. So like when we think of our menstrual phase, we're losing lots of blood. So like red meat, it has iron. I have a lot of women that struggle with like maintaining healthy iron levels, typically because we're kind of converting them over to a more balanced diet. And so red meat is super healing during that time. You're getting all the nutrients that you need, iron, a lot of things that you're losing. And so you kind of want to think about, if you're losing something, like what do you need to replenish it? So I would say definitely that, and then sea salt, because it's very mineral dense. And so those are like two things that can be helpful. And then that second half, this is where I feel like most women struggle the most. And so if we think of a few things, kind of depending on what you have going on, or even just what's happening in the body, like we have a lot of hormones moving through. That means your liver has a lot of work to do. So my favorite thing is to think about, how can you support your liver, so that, I mean, everyone's so different, but it's like, you know, if you did ever take the birth control pill, or you're taking other medications, or have other life stresses, like all that's going to impact the liver. And so like dandelion root tea, super simple, really supportive. Milk thistle, they can also help with bloating. Raw carrots, I'm obsessed with. They help process estrogen, and a lot of women struggle with that. And they might not even have high levels, but they might not detoxify or move it through the body super well. And so then it makes them symptomatic. So like broccoli sprouts, raw carrots, dandelion root, milk thistle, those are things, if you really struggle, they can help a lot that second half.
Mm, beautiful. I did not know that about carrots. I also love raw carrots.
They're really good for your hormones.
Great. Um, what else was I just gonna say? There's so many thoughts that are like going through my mind. I'm just like processing everything that you're saying and absorbing it all. Um, ugh. Sorry, everyone. Okay. You were just talking about milk thistle. Did you say milk thistle?
Mm-hmm.
Raw carrots. Oh, this is what I was just thinking. The liver. I just learned in this summit that like your liver has to process out all of these hormones that are being used. That's so interesting to think about, that your body's using these biochemicals as you move through this fluctuating cycle as women, and it is it's, they don't come out like when you're bleeding, like it's not your womb that is releasing these. It has to be processed out through your liver. That's really interesting and super good, I think, to know for women, and to focus on the liver, because it has like an insane amount of different things that it does. It's like insane when you look at what the liver does for the body. It's like hundreds of different things that it's always doing for us all the time, and it filters everything out. I just never would have thought I would have never even thought about hormones. I'm always just thinking about like alcohol and fat and artificial junk food and stuff like that. Just to think that your body's actually producing something that your liver needs to filter out is really interesting to me.
And I mean, the liver is probably like one of my favorite organs, if you think, because all the other things that it does, I mean, it also helps balance your blood sugar. So as our blood sugar drops during the day, your body gets alerted, and then you have gluconeogenesis, which is when your liver is going to break down some of that glycogen into glucose, put it into your system so that you can still have energy and like, have time between your meals and stuff like that. That's a really important job. I would say it like literally keeps us alive. And then it also converts thyroid hormone. That a big percentage of that happens there, and thyroid is central for all hormone issues, even if it's not. I see a lot of like subclinical thyroid issues, but a lot of it goes back to how is your liver functioning, and does it have all the nutrients that it needs?
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I have a couple of friends who have some significant thyroid issues, and I'm not sure if anybody has mentioned the liver to them. And I know that that is kind of like becoming more and more common in our society, is having thyroid issues amongst every other thing that we're having issues with right now. But that's a good piece to know of, because you can immediately start supporting your thyroid by supporting your liver. And thank you so much for those very specific suggestions on what you can do. Dandelion root, that's super awesome. Milk thistle, raw carrots. What else did you say?
Broccoli sprouts.
Broccoli sprouts. I love broccoli sprouts. Awesome. Okay. Give me just 1 second here to collect my thoughts. What do you feel are like some of the best like benefits that you have gained from this type of work and applying it to your life? What sort of positive experiences have come from this?
I think just like getting to know myself better. I feel like I'm a very, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate, like driven person. I will not say type A. I'm really not like a type A person, but I like to do a lot of things, definitely a people pleaser, and I like to accomplish a lot. And so when I started learning about the different phases of the cycle, and just that it's really normal to not feel the same every day, I was like, oh, okay, makes me feel like a lot more normal and human. And so I don't know, I think it's just like it's allowed me to slow down, enjoy my life more, and really kind of connect more with myself, which has helped me connect way better with people around me too.
Beautiful. Yeah, I actually was just thinking about that today because obviously I've been like focused on all things menstrual cycle as I've been building this summit. And I've been thinking about that, about how we are so constantly in flux as females in these bodies and how we're not the same every day. And I just was like noticing today, because I'm like paying more attention to how I'm feeling and my own fluctuations, I was just noticing some significant shifting within my own internal processes. And it's really interesting to like observe that on like all levels, not just physically, but like how your mental state changes the quality of your thoughts, your emotions. And I think it's really empowering for all of us to know this type of thing, to really like take that observer stance and like kind of detach from everything and know that you aren't like, it doesn't define you, to be able to like kind of step back and watch what's going on within you and know that there is a fluctuation happening within you that oftentimes will reflect back to you in circumstances around you, in your relationships, and they're not necessarily like, the outer world isn't necessarily where that's coming from. It's just reflecting back your own changes. Not all the time necessarily, because we are, you know, coexisting and living with other human beings with all of their energies too, but very oftentimes it can be a reflection of the changes that are taking place within you, and it's just reflecting back to you from your outer environment. I think that's really powerful to know that there's things happening within you and that it's not all coming from outside. Okay, so I think we've covered a good bit here. Is there anything else that you feel would be useful to add about any of this? You think we've covered it?
I feel like we've covered a lot, and I would just say, I mean, there's so many resources out there for learning more about this. I'm sure you have a million other videos in this summit that are going to help women as well. And I think just starting to pay attention, you know, like start paying attention to the information that your body is giving you and making note of it. We don't need to overanalyze it, but I think that as we start to pay attention to like what our needs are, our energy levels, cravings, all those sorts of things, that's when you can really be like, take in other information like from interviews, podcasts, books, and be like, what really applies to me? Because I think this journey can be really confusing at first. And so the more you turn into yourself, the more you're going to be able to figure out what's best for you.
Definitely. Ooh, that was a really good piece to end with. Thank you so much for that. That's something I am consistently talking to other people about, is the need for like personal discernment, because we are very oversaturated with information on the planet right now. And I'm pretty sure there is an argument that goes for and against just about every single perspective on the planet. There's an argument that's for milk against milk, for wheat against wheat, for like everything. There's just any perspective really could be argued either way. And it's so important to have personal discernment. Just like you said, I personally call it like sifting. I kind of like think of it like if you were like sifting through the sand for like treasures, and like just like go out and like sift through the information that's out there. Like don't attach to anyone, just like expose yourself to it, absorb what you can, and then feel into what feels true and right for you, because what's good for you isn't good for everyone, and what's good for others isn't good for you necessarily. So really being in tune with your own guidance, basically listening to your intuition and your body is, it's like the best doctor I think you can have. So that was a really good note to end with. Thank you for that. Also, before we go, I want you to just mention a little bit about how you work with people. And also, was there like a free period guide or something that you were gifting the audience with?
Yes. So I work virtually with all my clients. I do one-on-one. I'm also working on a nutrition strategies for hormone healing online training. So that will definitely answer a lot of the questions I feel like that we talked about and kind of give you both sides of a lot of different takes on nutrition, and help you find out and customize like what's good for you. So that will definitely be coming. I do have a free healthy period guide that you can get. I'll send you the link. I think you already have it, but then also on my website, you can always grab it. It's hormonehealingrd.com. I have blogs on there, lots of fun resources. And then that also links to my Instagram. It's just at hormonehealingrd.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. And thank
Thanks
you
for
so,
having me.
yeah, it's been a pleasure connecting with you for this, and thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning into this episode, and I hope everyone has a beautiful day. Amanda, thank you so much for being here. I will keep in touch with you, and you have a beautiful rest of your day as well.
You too.
Okay, aloha.
Bye.